have to admit, I am not the rifle guy. Yet. Inside of today's Two Guys Talking Guns episode, I've got one of my wonderful friends, Sean Pollock from Canada. Sean, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Mike?
I'm so great today. I know I'm going to be a lot greater when we're done with this episode. Again, for those that are curious, I love me some handguns. I've as a formal certified firearms instructor, all types of gun ice cream that are handgun flavored. Man, I'm in like Flynn. However, when it comes to rifles, Mike's got a lot to learn. And thankfully today I've got Sean Pollock, one of my favorite crisis negotiators from Canada, to come in and talk about a classic. What are we talking about today inside of Tickets to Your Favorite Gun Show, Sean?
Well, I'm hoping you're going to give me the opportunity to talk about some of the hunting rifles that I've grown up with and where I've finally settled in my adult years to know exactly what it is that I want to use and carry when I'm out in the Canadian wilderness looking for animals, and also taking my kids out to just do some plinking and target shooting.
I think it would behoove all of us if we got a little bit of background on your hunting experience. Tell us more.
So I'm approaching kind of that 50-year-old zone of life. So for about 40 years, I've been hunting the wilds of Canada. I was privileged. My dad grew up in a farming community. I'm from central Canada, like literally right dead smack in the middle. So where my dad was from was a very agricultural area, just about 3 hours west of where I live now. And he grew up sort of as a farm kid. Had the shotgun, went out and shot a few ducks in the fall. They used to chase deer around and so on. But he was never really incredibly passionate about it. It was just something that he did, if that makes sense. So I started when I was 10 or 11 years old, tagging along. And in Canada, you're allowed to start hunting when you're 12. So when I hit 12, I did my hunter safety course. That gave me permission, if you want to call it that, especially back in those days where I could actually carry my gun, had my own hunting license, and off I'd go. And at that point, really, it was all waterfowl and ducks and geese that we were out chasing. And from that point, it sort of evolved. And I was privileged. My best friend, even to this date, he's a hunting outfitter. And so we sort of grew up in that parallel stream of, we chased everything. We hunted birds, we hunted deer, we bow hunted bears, moose, whatever it happened to be. And so now that I'm a dad myself, I've got two kids who are exceptionally proficient hunters and have accomplished some amazing things. And over the last, roughly 40 years, I certainly haven't seen it all, but I've seen enough to drive me back to the field every fall looking for some new adventures and opportunities.
I love that. I think the value of hunting is just, unless you've actually been, there's so much to garner from it. And what I also love is that for those that have never gone or not jumped into it, it really is an alien landscape, which we just got done with an episode with Tyler Friel, who is in Alaska. And again, there's a difference between hunting in the wilds of Missouri and then hunting in the wilds of Alaska. And so again, we're talking about a completely different landscape here also inside of Canada. What generally when you go hunting, what are we talking about in regard to conditions?
Well, that's a great part about things, is that I've got the ability to hunt in spring here, in which case, you could be dealing with really nice temperatures up in the 70s and what have you when you're out chasing bears or turkeys early on in the year. Our waterfowl stuff, again, very temperate as a general rule, starting in September. But then you start getting into the true grit of the Canadian hunting season. And usually by the third week of October, we're getting into, it'll be freezing every day without a doubt. And then you start wondering, okay, well, how much snow are you going to have for deer season? And then some of our really shoulder seasons for some of the really big animals here, the moose and the elk and so on, we can go as late as January. And I was out this past year and it was minus 40 or minus 41, which I don't care if it's Celsius or Fahrenheit, it's basically the same number at that point. And it's just the coldest experience you're ever going to have in your life. So it's cool. We can hunt all different climates. It's one of the things that I'm always very passionate about, is that your gun's got to work in all those climates. And so that's why some of the pieces of gear that I carry with me have to be not only good quality, but you have to make sure you're taking care of them.
Oh, I'm glad that you talked about guns and how they operate in different conditions. Again, we talked about that with Tyler Friel recently. And while we didn't dig in deep with it, there's never been a more important time to understand not only your firearm, but what kind of lube you're using with it, the ammunition that's being used, but most importantly, where you're storing all of that stuff because of what you're going to experience in regard to especially cold, very cold. And minus 40, holy shit. Wow. So go ahead.
Well, it was one of the things that is kind of interesting here. You have to learn, and it's not taught widely. And I apologize, I don't know if Tyler spoke to on it specifically, but as an example, if you get into our later times of the year and you're hunting deer, you're hunting, that moose or elk season late in the year, as a general rule, we won't even bring our firearms inside. Is that once it's acclimated to being in that, whatever it is, -10 to -30, and again, I'm going to use Celsius there, leave it. We'll do everything we can, lock it up, obviously remove all the ammunition and so forth, have it in a secure place, but it's left outdoors. Because the moment you start bringing it in and out, now you get condensation building up, not only in the optics, also the barrel, chamber, everything else. That's just ugly. Because as you and I both know, when you want to pull the trigger and it's supposed to go bang, it needs to go bang. So that's one of the things when you put in all the work beforehand. It's the little things like that, as far as the temperature consistency, that a lot of people will they'll overlook that, and that can have some pretty catastrophic sort of consequences for you if you don't do it right.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, so the drum roll is over, and unless I blow it with the thumbnail for the episode, we have to showcase exactly what you brought as tickets to everyone's favorite gun show today. What do we got, Sean?
All right, so I'll tell you a little story after, but here is, and it's been made safe with the bolt removed and so forth, but this is my Cooper 270.
Look at that.
And synthetic stock, blued barrel. I've got a Zeiss 3x9 Conquest on the top. And that is the first gun that brought me into the Cooper world. And so where that actually began, if you'll give me a little bit of latitude on that one.
Yeah, go for it, man. I mean, the bottom line is you mentioned that you wanted to bring on your Cooper rifle, and I'm like, Cooper rifle? I have no idea what the hell we're talking about, so yeah, bring it on.
So there's a bit of an evolution. It's important to recognize that, again, my dad's first rifle that he bought was from the Timothy Eaton Company when he was about 14 years old. So in Canada, the Eaton Company was a pretty big deal. And what he bought was basically a repurposed World War II Lee Enfield Mark something. I couldn't give you the proper mark number, if you will, for the subcategory, but it was a 303 British rifle. And throughout my dad's entire life, that is what he shot. Now, it had about a 12 or 14 pound trigger press. It was good enough. Trust me, I used it for a bunch of years, but it was a very utilitarian rifle. There was nothing in there about, fit, form, or function. It was just, or I shouldn't say about the function. That's really all it was, but the fit and the form were certainly lacking. So as I started to get into my own hunting journey and so on, I started to buy better guns. And that's kind of a bit of a term you should say, an asterisk, because there are always going to be bigger, badder, better. But in 2012, I was actually sitting here doing some convalescence on the couch one day, and in the infancy of online shopping, I happened to go onto a Canadian gun site, and it was selling this rifle, a Cooper 270.
Right.
I'm like, wow, I've never even heard of this company before. So as I was sitting with some time in my hands, I started, using my friend Google and started to dig back into what Cooper was. And essentially, it's what I would refer to as a semi-custom rifle. So it's certainly not something where it's going to be a one-off production, but the level of fit and finish to these rifles, from everything that the internet said, was absolutely amazing. So after humming and hawing for a bunch of time there, I finally reached out to the company. I said, look, yeah, I'm interested in this. They agreed. I picked it up, and I'm telling you, there are certain guns that you're going to put in your safe that they're never going to go anywhere. We have some that will come and go, and they'll pass through, and we'll enjoy them for a bit. This one's never leaving. And since that time, I've bought a bunch of brothers and sisters to that rifle, and to a gun, they have been absolutely amazing as far as their accuracy, their dependability, and really for me, and this is obviously a very personal thing, especially when it comes to rifles, the fit. I find that for whatever reason, when I shoulder that rifle, it is right where I need it to be. And that seemingly is kind of an unusual thing, because as we talked about the weather, there's sometimes when I'm hunting in a t-shirt, and there's going to be other times when I'm in 16 layers of down-filled, whatever it happens to be, and the gun just fits. And so for that reason, and I said, obviously the performance, the accuracy I've had with it, it's never going anywhere. So I said, the evolution of, shooting my dad's 303 when I first starting to get into my own stuff a little bit with some of the Brownings back in the day. And I think even had a Kimber that I was like, okay, I've really made it. And then it was like, wow, these guns, as little information as there was about them, definitely seemed to be somewhere I wanted to go. once I opened that door, it was kind of like a fantastic Pandora's box to explore, because there's just endless possibilities. They're a very niche gun maker as far as even some of the calibers they produce, but 201, they have been absolutely amazing as far as their accuracy goes.
Yeah, no, you've talked about your 270. It sounds like you've got more than one Cooper rifle. Is that accurate?
I do. I think right now I'm at 4 or 5.
Mm.
I have the 270, which I will use for any of my larger animals.
Hmm.
So Canadian whitetails are pretty big, so certainly that would be the primary focus of this. But I've taken, I think,
And a quick question on the 270. What is it that's being shot out of it? What kind of round does it?
as a general rule, I'll be running hand load 130 grain.
Okay.
I've moved up the one moose that I took with the rifle. I moved up to a 150 grain. But that's sort of on the higher side. I generally try to avoid those for any of my normal hunting conditions.
Mhm.
So generally in and around that 130. And then as far as others, I've got a 223, I have a 243, I've got a 17 HMR. I had a muzzleloader, but this is kind of an ironic statement to make. It was too pretty. I couldn't bring myself. It was an absolute marvel of engineering and craftsmanship. I couldn't bring myself to take it to the field. So I ended up actually moving that one along, but the others are all sitting in my safe, and they all have their own uses, and they all have their own sort of niches that I like to take them out for.
Well, I love that, and I think that's also what I've begun to discover with talking to more people about rifles. A couple of episodes ago, we recorded what is essentially my first AR adventure with a fellow firearm instructor, Stephen Nichols, who has also done a favorite or tickets to your favorite gun show episode. And Stephen was one of the very first people to share the whole concept of having a series of rifles that each do different things. Because I think again, inside of the especially the American lexicon of what are just rifles, the big black ugly scary rifles, a lot of people think you have a rifle and checkbox, right? Oh, in reality, that's not the case at all. There's a variety of different uses. There's a variety of different implements. There's a variety of different things that you can pack onto a rifle that instantly make it something else to do something else specifically. And
Well,
I love that.
I think the important thing is we have to always show respect to the people who they've got the 130-06 or 270 that was passed down from their grandfather, and for 2 weeks a year or 4 days a year or a day or whatever it is, they happen to go to the field and it becomes part of their memory. Now, for you and I'm very passionate not about only about the actual experience of going out and hunting, but I love to shoot. I love to tinker. I want to understand what the physics are. I'm trying to figure out the loads for the varying rifles. So it's a big thing about how immersive you want to be. And I think in some perspectives, you could actually make it much like golf clubs. You know, you could go and you could play around a golf with a 5 iron or a driver. That's fine. It'll work. But if you want to go play around a golf and you want to do really well at it, you're probably going to need different clubs for different perspectives and different purposes. And so that's a big thing for me. One of the things that I really enjoyed was in my, I guess now I can say past life, I had a privilege of working with an armorer who was very big on 22 shooting and precision 22 shooting to become really adept at your trigger press and understanding some of the ballistics and so forth. And he helped me create a precision 22 that I shoot a lot. And the thing that he made very, very clear to me was he said, look, the 22 at 100 meters, give or take, but the 22 at 100 meters is the same as the 308 at 300 meters or 300 yards. I apologize. I'm using the Canadian terms here. But the big point behind that was when you start to learn the dope on your rifle and how you start to shoot. I mean, a lot of us, we will pick up a rifle, we will point it down range, and you will press the trigger, and you expect a hole to show up in whatever form of dot, crosshair, animal shaped target or animal, whatever it is. That's what you expect it to do. But when that target or animal is out 300 yards, 500 yards, now it's more a matter of, okay, what do I have to do and how much intimacy do I have with that rifle to know what the performance characteristics are going to be of it? And that to me is one of the cool things. You're forever learning. You know, it happens to be there's a bit of a difference in the humidity today. Well, that's going to change things a bit. My 22 has got some massive variances depending on what ammo it's eating that day. And so I've had to refine it to figure out, okay, so for that purpose, I need to go this far to get performance. With this 270, I mean, for all the hunting applications I would have for it, I could quite frankly go to the local sporting goods store and pick up a box of 270 ammunition and it'll perform flawlessly. If I want it to perform flawlessly plus a little bit more, then I make my own. So that's the cool part for me, is it's kind of that never ending journey of exploration.
The word exploration I think is perfect, and what I'd also kind of put it akin to is exploring the ocean. You know,
Hmm.
that you can go and buy a snorkel, and yeehaw, let's jump in the beach, right?
Yep.
But that you can also go into whatever depth into wherever you want, depending on how much money and how much sponsorships you have.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
what is always infinite, and again, I love it when we glance on things that just explain how important it is to be a perpetual student.
Yep.
It really is about that. There's always something more to learn, and if there's something else that is either the environment around you or something that's going on with the tools that you're using, that will always evolve, and that's why you also have to evolve and learn more about the things that you're not only using but also what's available. One of the
Absolutely.
one of the magical things about technology, especially in regard to firearms nowadays, is because of the augment of being able to leach in different materials,
Yeah.
especially ones that were never considered for anything else but whatever the hell they were used previously. And leaching those into the world of firearms is amazing. It instantly takes down usually the weight of things. What is that? What does that gun weigh, Sean? Do you know?
Probably the scope, it's around 7.5 to 8 pounds.
Okay.
I have to double check, but I don't have the exact number. One of the things that and I guess I have to draw a little bit of a distinction. This is very much a personal thing. When I was growing up, and I think you and I are of the somewhat contemporary age of one another, guns, especially for long guns, they were blue and they were wood. That's what a gun was. And so, especially when you had the variances in humidity and so forth, the wood used to cause a lot of, well, again, variance, because you'd get a tiny bit of warping within the stock itself, which would put pressure on the barrel. I have to admit, it was nothing that I ever saw, because really what I was taught to do was you took your rifle out, probably the Saturday before deer season opened on the Monday morning, you put 2 or 3 rounds into a pop bottle downrange. Okay, you're good to go. But then, as you said, you start to get into the sort of the nuances of what's out there. And this is where I sort of sit in sort of the dead center, because on the one side, I have absolute appreciation for a beautifully made wood and blued rifle or shotgun. They're works of art. Now, on the other side, I am huge fan of as you said, the components that are brought into this, the different types of alloys and so forth that are used in some of the components, some of the coatings and so forth that are on, especially on the outside of the barrel, for any form of weather resistance. They've become much more functional. Now, the only thing that I will say, and this is again probably a bit of a soapbox that I'm not sure if I've earned or not, but one of the things that I'm really passionate about is there's been a bit of a trend towards the concept of extreme long range shooting. And I'll watch one of my outdoors channels here, and I see guys, and they're zoning in on this whitetail who's out at 850 yards, and they've got out their ballistic calculators, and pulling out their MacBook to try to make sure that they've got the dope right. And to be quite honest, I turn the TV off at that point, because that to me holds no interest. What I understand is I want to learn the hunting side of it, which has always been the passion for me. But then I want to make that shot, which takes that fraction of a second, with a gun that I'm proud to shoot, happy to carry, and I'm proficient with. And for me, the longest shot I've ever made, about 300 meters, and that was very intentional. I don't shoot beyond that at animals anyway, because of the fact that I would prefer to try to get closer to them. So that's the one thing where I've seen there's been an evolution in the way that the firearms industry has evolved, where we're trying to draw some people in, saying, hey, you know what, you can shoot into the next county. Well, so that's a personal decision for that person. For me, I love carrying rifles that are extremely well built. They are durable as all get out. Like I've said to my son repeatedly, this rifle will be passed down to your grandkids. There's no reason it won't last more or less forever. And for me, the cool part behind that is, as my kids have grown up, I've taught them, I guess, my principles and ideals of hunting, but I've made sure that they're incredibly proficient with their ability to shoot the various platforms that we shoot in the household. And my daughter is an absolute dead eye marksman. She's been taught by some of the best, and I don't think I've ever seen her miss, which is quite a testament to her abilities as well. So it's cool watching the evolution of firearms, and as you said, what's being brought in as far as technology. I think technology is phenomenal, and it will do a lot of really good things as long as we recognize what the limits are for our purposes. And mine are going to be different than yours, different than your neighbors and my neighbors. That's fine, as long as people are comfortable and not always trying to chase that proverbial next best thing, because the unfortunate reality is that in some cases, the next best thing is a bit of a mirage.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I think something else to remember too. I compare firearms always. I think I've mentioned it today is to ice cream, where everybody's got their favorite flavor. You know, Sean might like some rum raisin. I'm not that fan. I am the double cherry top chocolate guy. And the neat part is that it's all out there, whether it's a mix of you making the flavor of gun flavored ice cream that you want, or
Yep.
finding someone else that has had something that you now want to acquire. All that is out there for you. You'd also mentioned hunting at distance. One of the things I think a lot of people forget about, especially when hunting animals at distance, is that sure, you might fell them, and then you got to go get them.
Yeah.
Most importantly, if you don't take them down, you then have to go chase them, and it's a piece that you might think that that's the end of the story. Now you just okay, so you pack up your rifle and you start hiking, right? Well, right, except that unless you're not on top of the food chain in the environment that you're in, then there's another X factor that's not only far larger than you, but far more deadly than you are, especially if the rifle is slung over your shoulder. And I think that that's something that a lot of people forget about, because remember, an animal that has been felled by a hunter is a giant pile of meat that emits odors that attract things that are far bigger than you, that have been likely around a lot longer than any of us. And it is one of the giant X factors that I always try to tell people about.
Well, and that's one of the main things that my family and I actually head out for every year are black bears. And we have some really, really large black bears in the province that I live in. And so one of the things for me educating my kids was a matter of ethical and lethal shot placement. And there's a lot of thought that goes into the type of bullet you're using, the distance you're shooting at. And then, as you said, if you have to start chasing after it, and I've got a couple of very fond memories of, and the reality is, use the term chasing, like recovering animals is part of the game. The reality is that these animals very seldom, especially with some of the other platforms that we use, they don't fall down instantly, no matter how well you put
And they
that.
also don't fall down into white packed envelopes that you can toss
Oh,
in your backpack and leave. That's what I love about the mystery, especially for people that have never gone or even contemplated hunting.
yep,
There are so many different layers of knowledge to quite literally dig into. I
yep.
mean, like it's an alien environment, dude. It's a wide open series of books, and you get to choose which ones you want to jump into, or you try to augment by having a team of people that then go with you.
And I think this is one of the things that I've really done. So my kids are teenagers right now, and as I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my daughter shot the provincial championship bear, which championship is a bit of a misnomer when it comes to hunting, but it was the biggest. It was the biggest black bear shot by a youth hunter. I think it was about 3 years ago, and
Wow.
the thing looked like a grizzly bear. When it walked in, she made a shot with a crossbow. We had to go and find it, and that was probably one of the most spine tingling moments. Like, you're every step you're being so careful and so aware of what you're dealing with, because it's amazing when you start to walk through the forest at, especially when you get into low light conditions, everywhere you look there's a black hole. And is the black hole just exactly that, or is it a big pile of fur that's angry because it's obviously been injured? Now, in this circumstance, it took us a little bit to find it, but we were able to do so. And we stumbled onto it. And I mean, quite literally, Mike, it was probably 4 or 5 feet away from us when we first saw it. And that isn't that's a heart in the throat kind of moment when you get into that. Okay. Yeah, this got real in an awful hurry.
What a phenomenal family moment, though, too. That's the other piece that I always try to. There's two situations that I want to share in regard to this. The first one is I love working at a gun range, and more importantly, I love being the range safety officer. And it has nothing to do with I love sitting in a quiet room with moving air and guns going off. It has nothing to do with it. What I love is to be cage side to every single light bulb moment you can imagine in regard to firearms. Everything from someone that is deathly, and I'm talking deathly scared of firearms, I'm talking like the fear of walking into a gun store and seeing literally guns kind of pointed in your direction makes people quiver. And taking people that are in that situation to someone that is not only proficient but wants to come back and then bring their friends and learn more about guns. That's awesome. But there's two instances that came up recently that I marvel at. Yesterday I was at the range, and there were these three gentlemen, all of which look like they just came from the gym. They're probably 24, 25, 26, right in that area. And there's a variety of different firearms that they've got. They had an AR with a suppressor on it. They had a couple of different handguns, and I just looked at them. And there's especially you as a police officer, you'll know this. There is you can see a kinship, like at distance. You can see it. And I looked at him. I go, "Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Mike. You let me know if I can help you today. I'm curious. How long have you guys known each other?" And they go, "Oh, forever." And I'm like, "No, no, no. I mean, like, seriously." And they all look at each other and they go, like, "I don't know, like first grade."
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that moves me in just about everything that I do, because to have the nature of having not only known each other forever, but have the access to firearms. And my God, here are three dudes in the middle of a Tuesday night out shooting guns with each other. I love that. That it's not about brotherhood. It's about that there's something else that's on a layer of relationship that firearms offer. That's the first one. That's the first one that always gets me. Because I have to be honest, I didn't have anything like that.
Yep.
I had absolutely nothing like that. BB guns might be the closest thing that I had to when I was a kid, because of just where we lived and the nature of guns in the states that we lived in.
Yep.
The second one that gets me every single time is, and there's, again, I marvel as a range safety officer, how many families, entire families, either between a 3 count or there's one that's a 6 count, they just come out to the range and spend hours together.
Yep.
Just shooting a variety of different rifles, or running through the rental case, or just the time that's spent, and the relationship building. And then I think the biggest thing that gets me out of the family part is that it's the trust thing. That and couples that come into the range, the concepts of building trust. I mean, like, could it ever get more dire or trust requirement than you're shooting guns together? And it's a magical thing that I wish I could somehow put into a bottle and let somebody just take a tiny little bit of sip of, to try and understand the value, not only the value of handguns, or firearms in general, but the value of learning about them. Because all of those light bulb moments that pop up, regardless of who you are, regardless of whom you're with, regardless of what kind of firearm you're using, it is magic. And I would love to just be able to sprinkle that onto a variety of people. And that's why we're here talking with Sean Pollock, a crisis negotiator in the great Canadian tundra, who also is an avid hunter, who's brought in his delicious 270 Cooper rifle today.
So one of the things that I think you and I spoke about very briefly is that one of the sideline pieces that I did 20 seasons as a professional waterfowl guide. And so when you speak about the familial connection, that was a thing was very, very cool for me. Is I was able to go with my best friend and my surrogate dad, and that was who I started my guiding with. But it was the people you're interacting with, and you had family after family after family that would come up. And what was neat was especially in the first couple of years, so you had father and son, father being say 55 and son being 30 type thing, and they'd be there together, and you could tell that because of life, they didn't get to spend as much time together as they would like to. And every year when they would come back up, there was an opportunity for them to reconnect. Now, could they have reconnected on a golf course or on a fishing boat? Of course they could have. But there's something to be said about there's an inherent level of discomfort in the kind of stuff that I'm doing that's appreciated and cherished. It's cold. It's early. It's, in some cases uncomfortable because of all of the things that are going on environmentally and the stresses of trying to make sure you're putting a good hunt together and whatever else it is. But you watch that evolution, because that 55-year-old father became 65 and the son became 40. And now there's a 15-year-old tagging along. And so now you've got grandpa and dad and son or daughter that's showing up, and they're sharing that experience. And the day that the camp would be shutting down for them on their adventure of whatever year it was, they're already planning for next year. And that's something where it becomes a bit of a focal point, because no matter what, and especially I don't do near as much target shooting and so forth as some others would do, but the hunting that I do and so on, the pulling a trigger is a fraction of a second, but it's everything that leads up to that, and the preparation and the trip to your local sporting goods store and talking to guys at the range to try to get more proficient. It all becomes part and parcel of the experience. And if I look back at all the things that I did with my dad, who's sadly passed on at this point, the times that I spent outdoors, and especially with his firearms and so on, that was a key for me. And one of the privileges for me as a dad was passing along my dad's rifle. So my dad, right towards the end of his life, actually went out and purchased one new hunting rifle. And I redid it, and I gave it to my son. I think it was 3 years ago now. And that's now his rifle for life. And so he has the ability, with something that meant a tremendous amount to my dad and to me, he will carry a piece of my dad or his grandfather with him every time he goes to field with it. That's a pretty cool thing. And I think that's one of the things that is overlooked by the non-shooting public, is there's this view of it being a little bit barbaric and just a little bit of let's just go out and kill everything. And I think people completely misconstrue the reason that we go out and we actually do shoot. Whether you're shooting your bow or a rifle, whatever it happens to be, it's you coupled with that instrument against yourself. And the ability to refine and collect all of the information from every different range session or hunting experience and get better. And to a point where you can now hopefully teach and train others. And I don't mean that in a formal sense of a formal education, but introducing others to the sports that we are so passionate about. That's the key to it. And I know that my son is always very appreciative when he takes, grandpa's rifle out with him. That's a huge win for him.
Yeah, the concept of legacy firearms in general is, again, it's a piece of magic. There's when anybody unfurls a firearm that wasn't originally theirs, especially if there's been multiple generations involved, there is again, there's this I can show it to you.
Yep.
and I love that. I love that. It just, again, it moves me so much, especially as a certified firearms instructor, because I love giving people the light bulb moments that can help them cradle those very special times in their lives that are not only tethered to the firearm, but tethered to memories that just they continue to build this augment to life that can always be shared. It is a piece of why I do Two Guys Talking Guns, and probably the most important part of why I do Two Guys Talking Guns. Two Guys Talking Guns was never conceived to be time to talk about the new kick-assery tech thing where we can go and shoot guns this week. We'll glance on things like that because new things are cool.
Yep.
But it's always been the value of the education of the firearms and what comes with it. It's this glorious Dagwood sandwich of firearm knowledge that I love to share with people, and then just let them pick at the Dagwood sandwich as they see fit. Whatever piece of pepperoni or salami or cheese that happens to float their boat, they get to go and just grab a piece of that, and they get to take a bite of that and go, that's pretty cool, and then learn from that. And then the best part is, you'll get into the, I'm not entirely sure what that is, but it's firearms related. What's this? And I love every piece of that. We started talking about Cooper rifles and the origin there. Can you spill a little bit of that on my audience for you?
So Cooper rifles basically started in Montana, and I have to apologize. There's an offshoot of that company. Basically, was an offshoot of another, and they created again these semi-customs. So they were producing sort of single digit numbers versus the the mass rollouts from Remington or Browning or whatever the case was. Now they were purchased by Nighthawk out of Arkansas a couple of years ago in the amalgamation. Now the point for me is people who become really passionate about their product. One of the things I was amazed with is when I'd reach out to them, because there were a couple times I had some questions about some of the fit and finish and performance, and even just a couple things. Because one of the challenges when you start getting into these semi-customs is trying to find things like magazines for them can be a bit of a difficulty, especially when you're in Canada and the manufacturers obviously in the U.S. But the point behind it is the responses that I received from them. They were always incredibly passionate about explaining. Like it was almost, probably sounds a little bit hokey, but if you're going to buy one of our guns, you're part of our family. And so when you get to that level and you could ask questions and they would get back to you with, okay, well, this is what you're looking at. You might want to consider A, B, or C. Fantastic. So the point for me, I got to be honest, it has very little to do with the financial value of what any of these firearms are worth. The biggest thing is that I know, based on the quality that they created and maintained basically through their production years. And obviously, I have to admit, I've not seen their stuff since they moved over to the joint venture in Arkansas. But every single gun that I have of theirs is not only a marvel of engineering, they're beautiful. Like even this one here, which is obviously a synthetic with some of the the blue barrel and so forth. When you look at it, everything that comes down to it, whether it happens to be, the fluting on the barrel or the spiraling that's been etched into the bolt, or the positivity of the safety, the way that the bolt travels, there's nothing that's been skimped on. Now, I've had the privilege of shooting a lot of different guns and owning a lot of different guns in my life, and they all have some level of flaw, whether it happens to be a bit of a sloppy bolt or they don't like certain ammunitions or whatever it is. I am yet to find a flaw with any of these guns. They just do exactly what they say they're going to do. And I do have a couple of them that are wood stocked, and the walnut that they choose for these firearms it's unparalleled. It's absolutely beautiful, which is always kind of I won't say it's a guilty thing for me, but it's one of those moments when I take it in the field, I kind of walk it along like this because I want to make sure that it's treated the way that it should be.
Yeah.
So what I've recognized is certainly for me the hunting calibers that I have in these in the Coopers, I've gone to the synthetic on that side because of the fact that, as careful as I am, the reality is they're going to get bumps and dings and so forth just in the usage side of the house. So one of the things that I'll say though is the capability that the guns have so far outperforms the human element. I've always viewed it as I want to be able to shoot as well as my gun can. And quite frankly, I won't ever be able to with these rifles. I've had some budget line rifles over the years and so on, and you're hoping to get a 2-inch grouping at 100 yards because the barrels get hot, they don't like eating certain ammo, whatever the case is. These things they're dependable, they're repeatable, they are absolutely precision crafted. And I said, I've had a number of guys who are very, very proficient and have a tremendous amount of background in long range shooting, as well as just even shorter range precision shooting. And they have nothing but positive things to say. And this, I promise you, I've got no allegiance or connection to Cooper other than being a fan, but they are, for me, the level when you get there, it's like, okay, I've made it. Now it's like, this gun will last me forever, and it'll last my kids forever without any doubt. Of course, there are higher end custom rifles out there and so forth. It's funny, I don't even look at them anymore. If I happen to see a Cooper float across one of the forums or marketplaces up here, I can promise you that my eyes hone in on that very, very quickly. And if there was ever a need where I was going to go out and pick up another rifle, a bigger moose rifle, a 300 or 338 or something like that, that's exactly where I'd go. I really wouldn't look anywhere else because I know the quality of gun that they were producing.
Well, and there's you're calling yourself a Cooper's rifle fan, and I don't think you're giving yourself nearly enough credit. there's the concept. I can remember when I called one of my fellow firearms instructors a zealot one time, and he's like, "Zealot, what's that supposed to mean?" And I'm like, if I have to explain it to you, then maybe you're just not understanding what I'm telling you. But there is a love of things that Tommy was so wonderfully eloquent when we recorded his episode recently, where he says it sparks joy.
Yeah.
There's also another YouTuber. His name is Wrangler Star. We'll put links to Tommy and Wrangler Star inside of this video. But which, by the way, if you're watching this on video, I want you to hit the like button and the subscribage and whatever else you can do down here in the little bits and pieces parts. That's awesome. But what Wrangler Star calls it is it gives him the fizz, and I've chosen to latch onto that one because it reminds me very much of drinking a wonderful drink that's refreshing and gives me the flavor that I want, and then the little bubbles in the back of my nose when I'm swallowing it. It is the fizz. It's something that, again, you have to experience, but when you do experience, it's something that you seek out and hunt. Well, I'm sorry.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. There's again, it's the palatable nature of what happens inside of firearms. We're going to take a quick break here during Two Guys Talking Guns. We're talking with, again, one of my favorite Canadian crisis negotiators. He's talking about the Cooper rifle. It's Sean Pollock. We'll be right back.
Wouldn't it be cool if your advertising could last forever? It can with perpetual advertising. Here's how it works. Unlike TV or radio ads, where every instance the ads are broadcast, they're only played once and lost forever. Perpetual advertising can have repeat exposure and replayability weeks, months, and even years after they're inserted in a podcast. So even if a podcast is a few years old, your ads will still be impactful to repeat listeners, as well as new listeners. This gives your advertising dollar the most bang for the buck. Find out more about perpetual advertising at twoguystalking.com/sponsors.
Look, the voiceover industry isn't for everyone, but why not give it a shot and learn? Start your voiceover adventure at the Voice Farm Voiceover Academy. Don't start and end up in the dark when it comes to commercial voiceover. Start outside the box with your voice box at the Voice Farm today. VoiceFarmers.com. That's VoiceFarmers.com.
Have you got a cool voice? Do you like to act? Are you quick when it comes to thinking on your feet? Want to help propel the future of training crisis negotiators across the globe and foster the future of law enforcement? We need you. It doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter what's on your plate. We want your voice to help us evolve the way that law enforcement interacts and succeeds when it comes to crisis negotiation. Ready to get started? Access BlueBaggersProject.com and start your role-playing voice adventure today. BlueBaggersProject.com. That's BlueBaggersProject.com.
Everyone, welcome back to twoguystalkingguns.com. I'm Mike Wilkerson, your certified USCCA firearms instructor. Today we're talking with one of my favorite people, Sean Pollock from the Great White North of Canada. Hello, friend. How are you?
I'm great. Great to be here again.
Sean has brought in some wonderful tickets to his favorite gun show. Today it's the Cooper 270. Thank you again for bringing that in today.
Absolutely. Glad to talk guns at any point, and certainly specific about this one.
Yeah. We what we're going to jog on to now is actually the optic that is on your firearm. Would you mind showcasing the optic for your firearm real quick, Sean?
Sure. Yeah. Just give me a moment here.
Sure.
So on mine, if you can see us here, I have a Zeiss Conquest 3x9x50. Now, a couple things that are really important to me. One thing, I grew up in a family where you went down to the sporting goods store and you bought the whatever it was, the Bushnell 3x9 $69.99 special. I didn't know that there was better stuff out there. And then I realized as I got further into life that yes, there is better. Now, better is unfortunately a bit of a relative term when it comes to optics, because you can go from better to insanely better. Now, where I've landed is I have to admit that Zeiss for me is my favorite glass company, whether it happens to be binoculars or scopes or whatever it is. That's where I want to live. Now, a couple things that I'm really passionate about when it comes to hunting. One is, as I'm getting a little bit older, light gathering is a huge piece for me. So therefore, I've moved up to a 50 millimeter objective on all of my rifles. light gathering, especially in low light conditions when you're
And
most.
Sean, I'm going to break in. Why don't you explain to people what that means? And frankly, you're explaining it to me too. I've actually never heard those words gathered together.
So basically, the size of this ring here, as a general rule, most hunting rifles, you're going to end up somewhere between a 40 and 50 millimeter objective. So basically, the distance across on this. The idea behind it is that Zeiss, very specifically, they make brilliant, beautiful glass. But for hunters, you want to gather as much light as possible, because when are you most likely to be seeing something? First light in the morning, last light at night. So the longer you can maintain a good sight picture, obviously within the context of the law and so forth, is really important. So you gain as much light as you possibly can. But there's a couple of things that are really important to note on this. And this is something that was taught to me that I didn't realize. Your entire system is only as good as your weakest link. So when you actually start to put together your optic package, there's a couple of things that if I can zoom in on here.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to a Canadian company called MDT, Modular Driven Technologies. It's out of British Columbia. So I'm using, it's an MDT rail on there and MDT rings. Now, the point behind the rail is that it gets to a circumstance where if you had normally, and I use that term kind of loosely, I guess, but in my world, normally you'd have a ring at the front and ring on the back on some form of base that fits onto the rifle. Well, every time you put a connection in there, you have the opportunity for variance. Now, variance is, we might be talking thousandths of an inch, but there's variance. Well, if you put the rail on top, it's a solid piece of milled aluminum or steel. It's not moving. It is going to be straight and it's going to be true. So when you lock that in, and again, one of the things that I learned is your pressures of how you actually screw it on to the receiver, that matters. But once you get that on there, and then you again put some really good rings onto there, you're giving the gun the best opportunity it has to maximize the ability. So you have, the gun will shoot a half minute of angle. So with it at 100 meters, this gun will all day long, it will shoot 3 shots under a half inch. So super, super tight, way beyond what I can do on any given day. But if you had poor rings or poor bases, now what are you going to actually see? Because there's always going to be a little bit of flex. As stiff as we think rifles and handguns are, there's always a bit of movement in them because of the forces exerted, heat, and all those other types of things. So for me, it's now a matter of building the entire package. So all of my rifles, whereas at one point when I was a kid, it was a matter, as I said, you go down to the local store and you pick up whatever you could. Now it's very precise and specific about, okay, I've got the rifle, which I know what its capability is. I'm going to put the right kind of base on it to minimize any form of movement. It's going to be torqued down to the right level. I'm going to put on some really good rings that are not going to have any play in them, and they're going to be machined and manufactured to the truest specs possible. And then I'm going to put on some really good glass. And I realize that some people are like, well, you know what, I've spent $1,000 on a rifle. All I can afford is $200 for a piece of glass. Well, you're kind of hamstringing yourself here. If you buy yourself the Ferrari and all you can put in there is the cheapest fuel, probably not for you. Now, I'm cautious in saying that because everyone's got their own price points and so forth, and I don't want to disparage anyone. But it's something you need to be aware of, like shooting good ammunition through a good rifle with good glass. You're going to have the best result you can possibly have. So I'm very passionate about that. So all of my guns, actually, aside from one, they've got Zeiss glass on them, because that's where I've landed for me with eyes that are starting to age. I love the sight picture. It's clean and crisp all the way to the edge. I mean, once you zero the gun, it's there. And that was one of the things that I saw through some of my professional stuff was you'd see some guns that had to be treated really carefully because, well, we don't want to knock the glass off and so forth. I'm not that careful. I'm a bit of a klutz. So for me, I want a gun that if it happens to get banged a little bit, going into the back of the truck, I don't have to worry as much. I'm always very careful about making sure the gun remains true to zero, but I'm not going to be freaked out about the fact that, I constantly need to be checking that zero because the gun, the zero travels on it. So for me, you picked up a very good point. The gun in this circumstance and the optic and then that mounting system, they all match sort of in the strata If that makes sense, they're all very good quality. So when you put
But
them all together, it's going to do amazing things for you.
one of the components inside of firearms that I always talk about, someone will walk in and they'll go, "Hey man, so like I see I can get into it. I can get into AR for 450 American dollars."
Yeah.
And then they look up and they go, "Well, this Daniel Defense over here though, it's $2,300.
Right.
What's the story there?" And what I always tell people is that, well, it's about quality, but it's also about the tolerances that are talked about. And usually when I mention the word tolerances, you'll kind of see them do the whole dog cocking head side thing, right? where they don't really know what's going on. And I goes, "Okay, what kind of car do you drive?" And they'll say something like, I drive an F-150.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, all right. And so F-150, it's got a steering wheel and four tires, right?
Yep.
And you'll see them nod, and then I'll go, okay, so does a Ferrari Testarossa.
Right.
And then again, it's about light bulb moments for me. There's no question. You'll instantly start to see where instead of getting the head cocked, you get the nod. And I love that. Again, it's having reached now way more than 50. I'm 55 as of a couple of weeks ago. The concepts of delivering and then hunting light bulb moments over and over and over again is what helps propel me as a perpetual student in life. And it's incredibly rewarding. I always encourage people to do that. And again, what I love about firearms is that it's never ending. There isn't a deep enough water that you can go into where there's not something else to find out more information about. It's amazing.
So what I find kind of cool about the firearms world in general terms, when you talk about the varying niches that people can travel and track into. So in Canada, our firearms licensing and some of the legalities and so forth make it pretty difficult to own a handgun in Canada. So for me, I had one for my professional life. I've turned it back in. I don't have handguns. That's not my passion. Kind of the converse side of that was, as I was growing up, that buddy of mine and his dad, who I guided with for years, they moved very early on into muzzleloader hunting. And I'm talking primitive, like flintlock muzzleloaders, where, my surrogate dad, he built his own muzzleloader from scratch. So when you think about the level of immersion you can go into any of these worlds, I don't care if you go into cowboy action or you go into precision 22 or you go into muzzleloading or you go into some of the other ones where you're transitioning between all the different platforms. There's always something that you can learn. So, and even the nice part behind that is I'm a huge muzzleloader hunter now, but I didn't follow their path where they went down the, again, for context, like the Davy Crockett path. I went down the much more modern muzzleloader path. And one of the main reasons for me, and I don't say this with any level of arrogance at all, was I had shot enough animals over the years with a rifle. And so it was like, well, what's the next challenge that I can give myself? I've been bow hunting for years, but if I want to extend my season, I moved into muzzleloader hunting. And so I said I had my Cooper muzzleloader for a while, which I ultimately, as I mentioned, sold. But that it was a fascinating thing because there's an inherent inaccuracy. You're not talking about a beautifully prepackaged round that you're going to pick up from the range of the sporting goods store that was put together in a factory somewhere. This is you sitting there measuring out powder, which is going to be imprecise the best of times. And now, how much pressure did you actually exert on the bullet as you're seating it on the powder charge? And what's the temperature out? And when did you last clean your gun? And do I have the right percussion cap on there to make sure I get positive ignition? It's just a whole bunch of different stuff that you can immerse yourself in. So that is one of the coolest things, is that whether it happens to be, I'm 100% respectful of somebody who has gone out, they have grandpa's Remington 700 in 30-06 or 270, and that's what they're doing. And they go down to the sporting goods store and they buy, the normal box of Federal or Remington ammunition, and out they go and they shoot their deer per year, and they're just enormously happy with that. That's fantastic. But for me, it was a matter of, okay, I bought the gun. Now I recognize there's a whole new world, which is on the reloading side. Okay, well, I'm going to try different powders, and I'm going to try different bullets, and I'm going to try, even in the different powders, a little bit more powder, a little bit less, until I find the I'll call it exact because there's never exact, but the closest recipe that I can find to maximize performance for me. So it's the coolest thing. I love exploring. I love learning. I love digging into things. And the cool part is my kids are watching me lockstep, and they're playing with the stuff too. My son and I, we will sit down together and we will sit and reload. My daughter is an absolutely remarkable muzzleloader shooter. So they're just cool things to examine yourself. And what I'm passionate about is going to be different than you and different than your neighbor and your other fellow firearms instructors. It's a very immersive world that will give you the opportunity to do as much or as little digging as you choose to.
Yeah. And it's great that you're talking about learning, and it's another chance to pimp another future program that's coming on the Two Guys Talking podcast network. It's called the Gun Encyclopedia. Imagine my amazement when I was able to acquire the domain name gunencyclopedia.com. And I have to tell you, the fellow firearm instructor, his name is Arian Ramirez, also known as Draco Ramirez. He and I were just having a very just bland conversation one day, and he goes, I think I'd like to do a program. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what are you thinking? He's like, well, I wanna, and where he started was, I want what is just an absolutely unbiased look at 1,000 rounds through a firearm.
Yep.
And I'm like, I'm in. Like, how do we make it happen? He's like, well, I don't even know what to call it. And I go, well, so it sounds like a series of ongoing inspections / looks at a variety of things. So kind of like a dictionary or an encyclopedia for insert name of firearm, right? Is like, yeah, that essentially is it. We're going to talk about the gun. We're going to talk about the history of the gun. We're going to talk about the general positives of the gun, the negatives of the cons of the gun. We're going to talk about how to clean the gun. We're just going to, it's going to be a, like a one place to go for all the information. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds very much like a gun encyclopedia for that gun. And so I just went to a registrar and I was looking up domain names, and I'm like, there's no way that gunencyclopedia.com is not taken, except that it wasn't taken.
It's yours now.
And so now it is. And so that's what we are cooking up. We are very quickly spooling up the Gun Encyclopedia. Gunencyclopedia.com is where it will live. It will be another branch of Two Guys Talking Guns, but most importantly, it's going to be a centerpiece for what essentially is just the amazing knowledge and information that Arian Ramirez has inside of his brain that he will now spill on to people that listen to the program.
Yep.
The guy is a fount. He is one of my favorite people to work with, because I can literally walk up to any firearm that is in anywhere inside of the building, and there's hundreds of guns that are inside of the retail showroom, and I can literally point at it, and he'll go, oh, that's the insert name, and then you can literally hear like the faucet of a garden hose beginning its onset, and then he'll continue streaming on until you decide to go over there and go, okay, that's great, let's go over to this one. It's going to be amazing. What I love is that it is going to be filled with light bulb moments about every firearm, especially, guys, the ones that you think you already know. You know who I'm talking about. Talking about the guys that know everything about every gun. And what Arian is going to spill onto you guys is stuff that you do not know, mostly because you're probably inside of one cone of knowledge about the firearm, or you're in one side or the other. He's going to give you an unbiased look at each of those firearms. Again, it's going to be gunencyclopedia.com. It's going to be tremendous.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. That'd be very cool.
Yeah. When we talk about cost for a Cooper rifle, what are we talking about? And I realize if you have the availability in your head to do the yogging that you'll need to do between the cost between US and Canadian, that's cool. If not, we can ask my speaker friend.
You're going to be north of $2,000. And again, some of them, depending, they've got a series or a line that's single shot, which generally is a little bit less expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, if you put it somewhere around $2,000, $2,500, the one thing you're going to see is if you happen to go into the woodstock varieties, they've got, again, exhibition grade, or I can't remember the proper terms to use, but like some absolutely stunning pieces of lumber that they're going to make the stocks out of, and that increases the cost. Sure. I've committed a point with this rifle is actually the Model 52 Excalibur, it's called, and for me, it's the perfect middle ground. It's I said obviously the fit, form, and function are amazing for me. Durable as all get out. So all of my hunting rifles are within that realm. Now you get into the Model 52, which is my 22, or I apologize, the rimfire. It's the 17 HMR that I have. They're going to be a little bit more expensive, again, because of the wood and stainless that are on those. But I would bank at the $2,000. And then, so this is one of the things that I'm kind of said very, very cognizant of the fact that I don't want to sit here and say that the only way that you're going to go out and enjoy hunting is if you have a Cooper rifle in your backpack. That's not true.
Right.
It's a place where I have landed. And it's a place where I've landed by making sacrifices in other ways when it comes to my hunting world. But what I do know is that the moment that I shoulder this rifle and I have done the work to put everything together appropriately, I know the round that's going into the chamber. When I press the trigger, I know what will happen. There's not a lot of play on anything in there. Now, if I miss, I will guarantee you this: it's not the gun. And that's the cool thing for me, is it gets to a point where, said, between the optic and all the mounting and so forth, when for the optic, the rifle, the build of the round that's being shot, all of that stuff is at that level. Now, I say it with true respect to somebody else who wants to put everything together for $700. But as your comment about the F-150 versus the Ferrari, both will get you from point A to point B. It's just a matter of how much enjoyment do you want along the road? And most people aren't exposed to a Ferrari.
Correct.
They don't know. They know they're out there somewhere, but they don't know that they exist. And I certainly would never disparage anybody who says, you know what, I'm not going to spend $2,000 on a rifle. But I would also look at somebody else who's going to spend $1,000 on a driver for golf, or they're going to spend, $500 on the best bottle of scotch. Those are things that matter to them. This is what matters to me, and I found a tremendous amount of enjoyment in them.
Yeah, I don't know that we can put a more perfect period on the sentence of defining quality. Again, the realm of firearms avails you with just so many different options that the hunt for what you want can literally be endless. It's so much fun. Sean, we've been talking about money, and what I always try to spill upon people. 3 years ago, I found something called Rocket Money. And Rocket Money is just for any of you that are, regardless of where you're living, whether you're in Canada or in the US or wherever else, you're obviously taking advantage of some sort of subscription set of a variety of different things, whether it's something that you're watching on your televisions or computer systems, whether it's some sort of antivirus for your computer system. Subscriptions rule a lot of our lives, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how many subscriptions stack up over a period of time. Rocket Money does a variety of things, but one of the golden things that it does is it helps evaluate which subscriptions you have, whether you have multiples, which you may or may not know. What it also does is just helps you to prevent you from lighting your money on fire. One of the things that I realized when I went out on my own now 3 years ago instead of marketing was just how much money I was not saving at all. I was literally lighting my money on fire until I jumped into the Rocket Money experience. Again, it's going to allow you to centralize every one of your bills so that you know what's coming out when. You'll know everything that's inside of your banking accounts, both your checking, your savings, whatever else you've got. You can put in whatever you'd like for it to monitor, and it will give you alerts, but then also help you optimize all of how your money is working for you. It's Rocket Money. I'm going to leave a link down in the description, both here inside of the video presentation, but then also at the show notes over at twoguystalkingguns.com. I encourage everybody to jump into Rocket Money, regardless of what you're going to be using it for, whether it's a global look at your finances or just something more personal where you need to start detailing what the hell's going on with your money. Rocket Money. I think the last thing I wanted to talk about, Sean, is you and I met through one of my favorite projects that I've ever participated in. And it is the training of crisis negotiators across the globe, which is I'm so fortunate that you and I have met because it is global. It's not a US based thing. It's not even just a law enforcement based thing now, as we have found out over the last 5 years, essentially working together, is that crisis negotiation spans way more than just law enforcement. We just happened to be the vein that you and I jumped in on it together with. And tell us a little bit about how crisis negotiation has impacted your life over these now many, many decades.
I mean, for me, it was one of those things that I didn't realize I was meant to do it until I found it, and then really started to immerse myself in that. So I was an active law enforcement member here in Canada from 2001 until last Friday. And in 2012, actually, I guess it was 2011, I actually joined our crisis negotiation unit and got formally trained at the Canadian Police College in January of 2012. Once I got into that world, it was the most amazing door opening in front of me, because really for me, it was the work was some of those profound and impactful you're ever going to find within a law enforcement career. Over the next number of years, I moved up into an administrative role with the team and started to coordinate the team. In the early 2000s, I guess it was, I actually joined the Canadian Police College as an adjunct faculty member. Going back, actually just predate that a tiny bit, I started teaching with the NTOA, the National Tactical Officers Association, which is where you and I have met through.
Absolutely.
And the amazing part for me is, again, much like the firearms world, it's just kindred spirits. It's people who do this not for the glory, not for the glamour in any sort of fashion. It's because it's work that you're passionate about and that you know that the work you're doing is going to save lives. And when we work within the critical incident world, and I'm privileged in that I was trained as a critical incident commander as well as a negotiator, the CNT side of things is far less flashy than the SWAT side. SWAT side, it's very overt. That's sort of the public face of any of these types of things. Whereas the guy or girl in the backstop there who's got a golf shirt and a little weird headset on, they're the ones that are actually communicating with that person who's having the worst day of their life. So from that perspective, the validation that I felt from the law enforcement side was never higher than when you're dealing with a person in crisis. It's led me to meet some unbelievable people, have experiences that I could have never imagined. I actually joked about it as I was leaving the law enforcement world. I said, like, if my high school guidance counselor would have said to me, okay, here's the deal. When you're, 50 years old, you are going to have had, training in Europe. You are going to have presented across the US. You will have worked hand in glove with the FBI and some stuff. You will have trained, I'm not even sure what percentage of the Canadian negotiators, but a pretty solid percentage of them. I just finished my first book. There's all kinds of stuff that I would have scoffed at when I was a teenager, because there was zero chance in my mind at that point that this is where I would have ended up. So said, once that door opened, I walked through it, and it was just working into an entirely new universe that I am privileged to still be part of and hope to be for as long as I possibly can.
And it is amazing. I also just realized the irony that this is a quick nod to Ms. Wolf, she's been gone now many, many decades. But Miss Wolf was my guidance counselor inside of high school, who also told me that, ever thought about the military? And prior to that, where I was going is I was a very wayward child. I can't remember if we talked about this previously or not, but I was a very wayward child. When I was 13, Mr. Isaacson, who I was still in contact with, he's still around, and Detective Cooper were a couple of people that helped me realize the folly of where my life was going. So the sweet irony of us today talking about your Cooper rifle and Detective Cooper helping guide me in a previously wayward life. That's again a little delicious nod and a little Tinkerbell tinkle there.
Yep.
But that's always a great bit of fun. Well, Sean, I can't thank you enough for coming on to twoguystalkingguns.com today, finding out about rifles and more importantly about the chemistry set that is hunting, especially for a family, is just incredibly inspiring. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your story today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You got it. We'll have to do some more because I know you have far more than one ticket to your favorite gun show. Guys, you've been listening to twoguystalkingguns.com. I'm Mike Wilkerson, a USCCA-Certified firearms instructor, father, and friend to that dude right over there. That's Sean Pollock. Thanks for coming on, Sean.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
You betcha. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.